name is Rachel, and I'm here to tell you about the books I read in June. First up, I read a total of 15 items. Of those, 7 of them were graphic novels, 2 of them were adult fiction, 4 were young adult fiction, 2 were juvenile fiction, 1 was an audiobook, 1 was an ebook, 13 of them were in hard paper formats, 1 of them I gave 1 star, 2 of them I gave 2 stars, 8 of them I gave 3 or 3.5 stars, and 4 of them I gave 4 stars too. In the order that I read them, first I read Amulet Volume number 7 by Kazu Kibuishi. I can't remember the name of the specific title. I'll put a picture of it up. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. I think this was one of the better in the series, and it really got me pumped up for Volume 8, which is not even out yet. I'm not going to describe the Amulet series to you. All I'm going to say is that it's a very cool juvenile comic series, and I would recommend it, but every time I try to describe it, it just sounds really bad. And it's not. It's really good. So please look it up if you're interested. Don't wait for me to describe it because I will ruin it for you. Number 2, I read Jacobi by William Ritter. I gave this 3.5 stars. I felt like there was just something missing from this one for me, and I really can't pinpoint what it was. When it was over, I just wish there had been something. I wanted something from this book that I didn't get, and I don't know what it was. But overall, I enjoyed the reading experience. We follow a young lady who is new to the old New England area in, I think it's like the late 1800s, early 1900s maybe? I'm probably completely off in that reference, but she's looking for a job, and she finds Jacobi, who is kind of an eccentric, magical detective. He definitely has an element of fantasy about him, and he kind of brings her along for the ride, and she's just in love with this job, and they do solve the mystery, even though they end up in jail. And it was a fun ride. I am definitely planning on reading the second and the third books in this series. Next up is Jamaica End by Daphne du Maurier, and I gave this one 1.5 stars. I did not enjoy this one. Nothing happened for me. I found it to be very uneventful. I found it to be very frustrating. I was irritated with the majority of the characters in this book, and I felt like I wasn't surprised by any of the elements that were supposed to be a surprise. I kind of felt like I could feel it coming. So, I don't know. This book just didn't do it for me. Again, I gave it 1.5 stars. Next up, I read the first book in a series by Catherine Applegate, and I believe the series is called Roccos Rules, and the first book is called Never Glue Your Friends to Chairs. And this is a juvenile book that I have in one of my school libraries, and I thought the cover was adorable, so I wanted to pick it up and read it so I could reference it. And I thought it was a very cute story. It had several elements that I found entertaining even as an adult. And basically we're following a small child who is kind of learning the ropes of life. And in this particular book, he learns that you should not super glue your friends to their chairs, and he takes the don't you dare glue to school to help out his teacher, and he ends up gluing his friends to their chairs, and it's just really cute, really short, and really entertaining, I'm sure, for children. Next up, I read Giant Days Volume 1 by John Allison and several other authors. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. We follow 3 girls, and they're just kind of hijinks, and it's cute. I enjoyed it. I will continue reading it, but I didn't really think anything particularly special happened, but they're easy to read and enjoyable. Next, I reread Explorer Volume 1, The Mystery Boxes. This is a graphic novel collection edited by Kazu Kibuishi. I gave this one 4 stars. I love the idea, I love the concept, and I love the execution of these. Basically, Kazu Kibuishi collected several of the big names in the graphic novel industry, and they all came together and they wrote their own take on the idea of a mystery box. So you get a collection of graphic novels, of short graphic stories in this collection, and it's so fun. It's amazing to see all the different art takes, because I think when you just read graphic novels, you know, over a span, you don't really appreciate how different they all are, and the special effects that each illustrator brings to his own art. But I think it was really interesting. I love how everybody had their own art take, like I said, and I like how everybody had their own spin on the same idea. I thought it was really cool, and I enjoyed it just as much the second read as I did the first. Next up, I read Just One Day by Gail Forman. This was the audiobook that I listened to, and I did not enjoy this one. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I'm really surprised because I love this kind of book, this like travel romance. That's just right up my alley. But I don't know. I just felt like the main character being she was so annoying. I could not get past her. It wasn't the writing or anything that was the problem. I really liked a lot of the other characters, but that main character, I didn't like her. I didn't like the choices she made. I thought she was ridiculous about several things and kind of whiny, and I just never got over it. However, there is kind of a odd ending to this. I don't want to give it away, but it definitely made me want to read the second one, so even though I didn't really like this one, I have to read the second one now because I have to know what happens. And that is a tribute to Gail Forman's writing, because even though I can't stand the main character, I have to know what happens in the story. So I guess thank you, Gail Forman. Next up, I reread Outcast Volume 1 by Robert Kirkman. He's the author of The Walking Dead, and this particular volume was called A Darkness Surrounds Him. I enjoyed this a little bit less than I did the first time, because I wasn't really expecting it the first time, and I think once I knew what was happening, it wasn't as interesting to me. But this one follows a story of a guy who is surrounded by people who are basically being possessed, and he has something in him that can help these people overcome their possession or exorcise these people. I don't know the proper terminology, but it's caused him a lot of grief, and he doesn't really understand it, and it was a very interesting idea. I like this concept more than The Walking Dead, but I'm not sure it has the same sustainability. But anyway, I gave this one 3.5 stars. Next up, I read The Case of the Stolen Sixpence, which is book 1 in the Mystery of Maisie Hitchens series by Holly Webb. Again, this is another juvenile series that I have in my children's libraries at school, and this caught my interest and I wanted to give it a read, so I did. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was cute, but nothing particularly special for me, but I do think a younger audience would like this a lot better. I think it's very much suited for them. It's very short, and there is a mystery that keeps you going, but it's not like dark or anything menacing, so I think the kids are really going to like this series. Next up, I read my favorite read of the month as an ebook. I got an e-arc of this from NetGalley, so thank you to NetGalley and the publishers. I got Before We Go Extinct by Karen Rivers, and I've already talked about this several times on my channel, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was tremendous. The only reason I didn't give it 5 stars is because there was just a few times where I wish they had left something out, because it just seemed to kind of distract from the story a little bit, but overall, I thought it was amazing. I love the concept, I love the idea, I love the execution. I think it's such a valid and important book. I just loved it. So do yourself a favor, go read Before You Go Extinct by Karen Rivers. Next, I picked up Escape from Asylum, which is the prequel to the Asylum series by Madeline Rowe. This was my favorite book so far in the series. I've read 1, 2, 3, all of the stories that came out, and then this is the 4th book, and it's the prequel. I thought it was better than all the rest. Now, typically with the Asylum series, it follows these 3 students who met at this college program over the summer, and they are assigned to a dorm that used to be an asylum, and that's kind of the premise for the series. And it was getting a little old with them. I just didn't really enjoy it, and I didn't enjoy the short stories as much as I'd hoped, so I'd kind of gotten to the point where I didn't think I was going to read another one in the series, but when I found out it was a prequel, and this one centered on the asylum when it was up and running with the awful warden, I was like, I've got to read this. And it was amazing. It was pretty scary, I thought, and very much of a thriller. I originally started this series because they said it was like a young adult version of American Horror Story, and I'm like, well, yeah. However, I didn't find that to be true when I read them. This one, though, I did. It reminded me a lot of the Asylum season of American Horror Story, and I found it very kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say like terrifying. I was able to sleep, but it was a little like, oh, you know, this one really got me where the others didn't so much. So I thought this was the best one in the series. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Explorer Volume 2. This was the Lost Islands edition by Kazu Kibuishi. Same thing as before. He brings together all these graphic novel experts, and they all create their own short graphic stories about Lost Islands. I thought this one was good. I really enjoyed the artwork and the different perspectives on the idea, but I didn't quite enjoy it as much as the other one. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Explorer Volume 3. This one focused on hidden doors, also edited by Kazu Kibuishi. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars as well. I liked the concept. I really like the idea of hidden doors. That one like sparked my interest. I'm like, what would I write about with the hidden door? But it's the same thing. I didn't quite enjoy this one as much as the first volume. But I did enjoy it. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Outcast Volume 2, A Vast and Unending Ruin, again by Robert Kirkman. I didn't enjoy this one as much as the first one. It kind of felt like an in-between book, but it really got me geared up for the next volume to come out. I really want to see what happens. Although, I felt like this one, I shouldn't say it's a filler book. What I mean by that is it's filled in a lot of questions you have from the first one, but not a lot actually happened. So it literally filled in the details from the first one, but it wasn't as action-packed as the first one. Does that make sense? But anyway, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, and I'm still going to read Volume 3. And lastly, the book I just finished last night was Security by Jenna Walsdorf. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago on my channel as one of the books that was new release that I was excited for. This one just didn't quite live up to what I was expecting. Now, let me tell you what I was expecting. Originally, they kind of blurbed this as Stephen King meets Daphne du Maurier's like Rebecca style thriller, not Jamaica End, like Rebecca. And I thought that's interesting. I really like this idea. And it was centered around this hotel that was built to be like the most secure place in the world. They were targeting, hopefully, like celebrities and really big name politicians who were wanting to kind of get away from the media and, you know, have a certain level of privacy. And before the hotel can even open, a killer comes in and starts offing the employees. And that's the premise of this book. So I'm like, that sounds awesome. However, I don't think it turned out as well as what it could have. Now, I like the idea. Anytime you have like a serial killer stalking an empty hotel with like just a few people, I just think that's terrifying. There's all these rooms and it's just hauntingly empty and ugh. But I like the idea of the way she narrated it, but I don't like the execution of the way it ended up, if that makes sense. I found the narration, although interesting, to be really confusing. I found myself so often having to go back and figure out who was talking or where we are or how we know this. It was just really confusing to me, I thought. Maybe I just wasn't focused enough, but I mean, you would literally switch to like 4 different perspectives in like one page. It was just really confusing to see who was talking. I don't know. And the problem with that is that when you're reading a suspense novel and you're confused and you have to go back, it like breaks that suspense for you, you know? So, I don't know. I really like the idea of it, and it is very much like The Shining, I thought. There's a maze that directly alludes to The Shining, and then there is, the name of the hotel is Manderley, which directly alludes to Rebecca. So those analogies are very good with this book. I would also throw in a mix of Johnny Got His Gun. So, yeah, think about how that would tie in. But I don't know. It didn't work for me. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. And those are the 15 books that I managed to read in June. Now, for July, I'm not going to set a strict TBR, but I do have a few books that I'm hoping to get to. The first is The Bat by Joe Nesbo. I was supposed to read it this month with my mom, and I didn't get to it, so I'm going to be reading it this month. I also want to read The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh. I have been wanting to read this book forever. It just doesn't seem to happen. I also want to read Before the Fall by Noah Hawley. I think this is the book I'm reading with my mom this next month. And I am currently reading I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid, I believe. So those are the books that I am hoping to get to in July at least. And hopefully we'll have another decent sized wrap up for you in July. So